Serious, people who have accidentally caused the death of another person, what happened? When I was younger, playing Xbox whilst at my grandparents' house, I had left the room to go to the bathroom, leaving my wired controller on the floor. I suddenly hear a thud and decided to finish my business before seeing where it had came from. Whilst cleaning up, I heard a scream from my grandma and was told to stay in the bathroom. And so I did. Found out that my grandfather had accidentally stood on my controller and fell over the wire, cracking his skull open on the table, and was announced dead at the scene when the ambulance arrived. I'm now extra cautious with where I leave items, encouraging my younger brother and sister to clear up their mess once they're done. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores, etc. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's diseases, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle, and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit, and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous, and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. When I was 4 years old, my mother was roughly 3 to 4 months pregnant. One day I was supposedly crying and throwing a tantrum over a toy or something. My mother tried to comfort me by cradling me in her arms and take me to my room, which was up the stairs, but I cried and kicked so much that she lost her balance and fell down the stairs. I was unhurt, and mother recovered without any lasting injuries, but my sibling died. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the street lights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between two crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud, and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him laying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911 but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I found out later was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up, and I finally saw my car with a flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked 3rd shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. Sorry if this comes through as rambling, but I've been actually explained this in writing before. Edit. Clarified/spelling on a few things. Edit 2. Thank you all very much for your words. There aren't a ton of people I can talk to about this because they just get super sad and coddling, so it's a strange breath of fresh air to get some of this stuff out in the open. Thank you. I'm not sure if this counts, but I wanna get it off my chest after reading these. My friend was a well-known and liked guy. Very social. Did drama, football, and baseball in high school. Some of the best moments of my life was with him. One day he just stopped coming around. He would read my messages but not reply. He ignored anyone else. It was so bizarre. One day, he came to my house, and it was like the good old days. He said he got into target shooting, but his gun blew up because he fired a bullet that had been in the washing machine. He had some powder burns on his hands. He asked to borrow one of my guns, and I said yes. 2 days later he shot himself with it. I've hated myself since. Most of our mutual friends hate me. His family hates me, and I was barred from his funeral. I feel so bad I didn't see the signs. I miss you, Tom. I wish I could have helped you, like you did me. Edit. To clarify, he borrowed my gun. Also, thank you all so much for your words of support. I wish people here could see things how you did. It's taken years, but I no longer blame myself for what happened. It still haunts me. He was being himself that day, laughing, joking, and making plans for us to hang out more. I'll let him borrow the gun without a second thought because I got lost in the moment. Plus, as soon as I said yes, he carried on like it was no big deal. We grew up with guns. A lot of people don't see that. Most never asked. To them, I'm the piece of who gave him the gun. Plus Tom was very popular person and I never was. So I guess it's easier for them to demonize me. It still hurts though. I wish I could have talked to him about how he was feeling. I wish he'd shown a sign of sadness, something to clue me in. Every day, I spend time playing the what if game. I get everyone who knew him lost someone special, but so did I. And it's like I'm not allowed to grieve for him publicly. When I was 4 and visiting Japan, I opened back door of a car in Japan to the sidewalk, but a motorcyclist driving in that space between the curb and road slammed into it. Blood everywhere. I don't remember the exact aftermath, since I was so young, but everybody was screaming, and I just sat there not understanding exactly what was happening, until my mom ran off the scene, and into the building in tears. Thanks for the kind words, everyone. I don't blame it on anyone. Even myself, as it was just a really unfortunate circumstance. As for the thing regarding my parents as discussed below, don't worry about that either. They're out of my life, but honestly while I do believe my parents did some really crap to me, I don't wanna be angry at them. I'm here now and by myself, and I think the best course of action is just to put them and this ugly event out of my head. Unless it's to tell you curious folks. Thanks for the kind words and reassurance. Former paramedic here. We tend to have a fair share of what we ourselves consider deaths we are responsible for. You don't always interpret all situations right. There are days your hands are a tiny bit shaky and you miss that vein or trachea, etc. But I will always remember the first one. As a fresh paramedic, 65 years old male with chest pain, just had his birthday yesterday, now presents with chest pain. For this we give nitroglycerin as a spray. Works well, but has a downside. It reacts massively and violently with Viagra, etc., which was a brand new drug on the market back then. I asked the patient if he took any medication. He says no. Now the seasoned paramedics already know where this is heading. I of course forgot to ask the wife to leave the room and ask again. Because he visited a hooker for his birthday. He crashed half a minute after I gave him the nitroglycerin, and despite all efforts died on scene. Edit. As it is asked a lot, we found out about his secret birthday party via the police investigation. Every death that is non-expected in my country mandates a police investigation to rule out any wrongdoings. One of his friends told police the truth, and I'm fairly sure the family received the police report as well. Edit 2. Nowadays it is protocol for most services to explain to the patient that he will most likely die if the has taken any Viagra, etc. The consequences were known back then, 1999, merely months after it became available in my neck of the woods, as well, but we weren't as explicitly trained on it. It needed a few cases like the one above to change training and push that scenario into every healthcare professional's mind. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time. As he looked back at me, my buddy is a good sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After their investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines, but never got any sort of lawsuit. 7. I sham on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill, and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath, and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. Deployed in Afghanistan. Urban area. I got into programming to kill the time. Had an Arduino set complete with everything I would need to make tons of little gadgets. Got pretty good at it too, going to school for it. When I get out, when it came time to go home, I didn't have room to take the kit with me, so I threw it out. Keep in mind, locals work on this base, and in my time there, at least 3 had been kicked out for ties with the Taliban. Within an hour of tossing the kit, it had been taken. Didn't think anything of it. Probably some other soldier thought it was cool and took it. Big base, anything could happen. About 3 weeks after we left, an IED went off outside the gate. No NATO casualties, but about 20 civilians died in the blast. EOD reported that it was a strangely sophisticated bomb. They used my kit. My negligence gave them the means to kill 20 innocent people. I've never told anyone in the world about this, and it haunts me to this day. War survivor from Chechnya 94-96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17-year-old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, run out, the roof is gonna fall. And she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope, at least. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Siam. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back, and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it, and when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Edit. I think James and I were actually both 8, but he was much smaller. Second edit. Everyone responding has been incredibly supportive, and it means the world. I know realistically I couldn't change what happened, but that can't stop me from wishing I could. Thank you again to everyone for the kind words.